The Brics, a group of 5 of the world's largest emerging economies, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is due to hold its annual summit in Cape Town, South Africa, on the 2nd and 3rd of June to discuss several issues, including its enlargement. The 15th BRICS Summit returns to an in-person meeting following 3 years of virtual meetups as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the moment, 19 countries have expressed an interest in joining the BRICS group as it is hoping to prepare for the summit. 13 countries are formally asked to join, and another 6 have asked informally. Now, Saudi Arabia and Iran are among the countries that have made formal requests to join the group, and other countries that have expressed interest in joining include Argentina, the United Arab Emirates, Algeria, Egypt, Bahrain, and Indonesia, along with 2 nations from East Africa and 1 from West Africa, which we are yet to identify. But then, according to Anil Suklak, South Africa's ambassador to the group, the foreign ministers from the 5 member states have all confirmed that they will attend discussions in June. And in addition to its membership, they will also discuss hotspots, including Sudan, where a ceasefire appeared to have taken place on Tuesday after 10 days of conflict. So it's a whole lot of discussion that will be held in South Africa when the BRICS member nations come together to discuss about how to foster growth for the group. So this morning, joining me from Randburg, South Africa, is Professor Anthony van Nieuwkerk, International Relations lecturer at the University of South Africa. Thank you so much, Professor. It's nice to have you around.
Thank you, and good day to you and your viewers.
Now, we are beginning to see that over time, the BRICS nation has been trying to garner influence socio-politically, economically, and to see how it can strengthen its hold in terms of what it owes, most especially for it, and of course, what it can benefit from other nations. So now that we are seeing that 19 countries are hoping to join this particular group, do you think that BRICS has any plan whatsoever to admit these countries into its bloc? And if it's going to do that, how will it do it, and what are the factors it would be considering before it chooses to admit them?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. It's a good one. It's difficult to answer because it's not the case that any of these newcomers or applicants will join before the BRICS summit takes place a few months from now. Ambassador Suklal, that you quoted just a minute ago, explained that and if you visit the BRICS website, you will see that that the officials are busy constructing the guidelines or the criteria that needs to be applied when a country wants to join the BRICS alliance. And if you ask me, the BRICS summit in South Africa in a few months' time will sign off on the criteria for countries to join. And thereafter, we might see some movement. But it's not impossible to imagine that politically, the BRICS alliance, as it stands now, the 5 founding members, as a political gesture, given the dynamics of international politics at the moment, might reach out to a number of these applicants and invite them to sit in on BRICS activities already, almost like observers, and make them candidate members, and speed up the approval process as quickly as possible. And out of the 19 countries, it's really a shopping list of all sorts, big and small countries. A few stand out. If they join the BRICS alliance, it will make the political and economic clout and influence of the BRICS alliance much more significant, and it will become a player in global politics. And from the list that I've observed, I can single out Saudi Arabia and Iran simply because of their oil and gas reserves. I would also include Indonesia, given its size and its importance in Southeast Asia. And then I want to come to Africa. In fact, the theme of the BRICS summit in South Africa later this year is precisely to how BRICS can support the promotion of free trade in Africa. That's the key theme that South Africa is putting forward. So whether Egypt, Algeria, and Nigeria can join the BRICS alliance becomes a very important question. And I think South Africa will promote the membership of these three African countries as a matter of urgency, together with Saudi Arabia and Iran.
All right, Professor, just earlier on, you talked about the fact that the BRICS is working around rules and regulations and framework for the admittance of these countries. What are the major changes do you think that the BRICS will be bringing on board, most especially how to probably expand the scope to see how the admittance of these 19 countries will be both beneficial to these countries and, of course, to it also?
Yeah, I'm not too sure that I follow your question, but let me point out the principle that I think underlie the expansion of BRICS. It would be a mistake to think of BRICS as a counterpoint to the G7 or the G20, and I don't think it's the purpose of BRICS really to change the world order. BRICS is an alliance that serves the interests of its members. So instead of changing the world, it wants to make the world more compatible with its own interests. So it's not necessarily in the business of overthrowing what we call the liberal world order or the rules-based international world order and the way that America dominates global politics. It's simply an attempt to put together economically powerful countries with special features that if they work together, they can promote their own interests. And if in the process, they offer an alternative vehicle for global trade, meaning de-dollarize international trade, then it will be one of the positive outcomes as far as BRICS is concerned. So the countries that I've mentioned, they meet that criteria of having significant economic power, especially natural resources, oil and gas. We're very far away from this ideal state of a green economy or solving the world's climate change problems. At the moment, given the conflict in Ukraine and elsewhere, oil, gas, coal, natural resources, non-renewables are still very much important. It cannot be avoided. And so Algeria plays a very important role, so does Nigeria. And you can add to that Iran and Saudi Arabia and Indonesia. Right there, if you put them into the BRICS basket, you will be able to influence the global economic dynamics, including trade, but also energy security. Because if this is the configuration of BRICS plus, a year or two from now, then the majority of the world's reserves in gas will sit with BRICS. Almost half of the world's oil reserves will sit with BRICS, and that makes it a powerful player. But let me quickly add in one sentence that it's not all going to go very easy because there's competition on the multilateral stage. BRICS is not the only multilateral arrangement or coalition or alliance of like-minded states who wants to, influence global trade. Others play, there's OPEC to start with. There's also alliances in the East, in Africa, and elsewhere. And so some of these member states of BRICS, when they join BRICS, will belong to a plurality of regional organizations that will influence global politics.
All right.
And the challenge always for a country is where do you put most of your weight? Do you put it in one alliance or do you spread it across alliances? But if BRICS is going to have this heavyweight presence a year from now, I predict that those new member states will put their energy there.
All right. Now, we also see that BRICS has actually made conversations around having a single currency with which it can trade within the member states that, of course, are domiciled inside that particular group. And we're already seeing that India is already selling products in rupees, which means it's trying to give as much strength to its currency, as it were. Now, is there going to be a conversation around developing a single currency for the BRICS, and is it open to also use that as a tool to de-dollarize the emerging markets?
Yeah, that's a question that is very difficult to answer. You need the economist for a follow-up conversation. But it's very clear to me that the era of American hegemony or dominance in terms of global politics and global trade and economics is coming to an end. And we see the slow decline of the value of the dollar as the currency of choice when it comes to international trade. And indeed, Brics might not say it out loud, but I think it's very actively searching for alternatives to a dollar-denominated global trading system. And it will allow, it's already doing that. It's allowing its member states, plus the new members that will come in, to trade in their own currencies. And that's the shape of the new world order, I think, that's beginning to take shape. It will take time. And of course, we shouldn't ignore or downplay the power and influence of the Americans and the Europeans to counter this kind of initiative that Brics is bringing to the table. So I foresee more tension, not less, less cooperation, and more of a challenge between the heavyweight in Brics, I would say, is China, and the heavyweight in the West is America. That relationship is being put to the test. And as you know, and your viewers also know, Taiwan is going to be the case study to tell us what's going to happen next.
All right. Now, Professor, I'm more particular about the input South Africa has had on the BRICS, because it is the only African nation within the BRICS group. And we know that South Africa has been going over issues as regards power outages, rolling blackouts, load shedding, energy crisis. I'm talking about investors threatening to leave because of insecurity and not able to reap dividends of investments that have been made over time. And of course, the issue of unemployment and civil unrest. This has been factors that have destabilized South Africa's polity for a while now. So I'd like to know what South Africa has contributed to the group since its inception, since 2010.
Yeah, it sounds like an exam question that you're going to give me marks for. And you're really putting me in the spot as a South African, having to explain South Africa's weaknesses. And indeed, you put your finger on it. It cannot be that a founding member of Brics, a key member of Brics, find its own house not to be in order, and yet it wants to play a important role in shaping agendas in the global south or in Africa and elsewhere in the world. So if you ask me, South Africa is faced now with a dilemma. Its foreign policy or international relations, its standing in Africa and elsewhere in the world has been reduced because of the political turmoil that the ruling party finds itself in. It is too early to predict whether South Africa will recover politically and economically in order to continue to play that role in Brics and elsewhere on the continent as a sort of a sub-regional leader, if you want, in Southern Africa. And the key there will be to watch what will happen a year from now with our national elections in 2024. If the ruling party, the ANC, wins with a majority, 50% plus, it might be able to recover and resume a sort of a leadership role. But if the ruling party's support falls below 50% and it is forced into a coalition with minority parties, which is the story that we see happens elsewhere in Africa and further afield, then our foreign policy and our standing in the region and elsewhere will be challenged. Because South Africa will then have to find time to formulate its own identity and position internationally and continentally.
All right,
so I think there's a rough ride ahead, unfortunately. Okay. But make no mistake, our diplomats are very positive and energetic, and they are selling Brics as the go-to bloc to which you should belong as a member.
All right, so let's now talk about some diplomatic body language and diplomatic nuances by South Africa. When you look at Brazil, India, China, they have overtly and covertly supported Russia's onslaught in Ukraine. But South Africa has not really made a stance if it is in support of what Russia is doing or if they are against Russia's onslaught on Ukraine. So would this summit be a striking force, or would it propel South Africa to eventually take a stand? Because it has been coy on this, and people have been wondering, what is actually the stance of South Africa as regards this? So would this force South Africa to speak up?
Yeah, no, it's not difficult to work out where South Africa stands. It has been resisting very strenuous attempts, and some would even say bullying, by the West, by NATO, by America and Europe, to take a position to support the NATO view of the problem in Ukraine and the war against Russia. Our foreign minister is very clear about. In fact, as diplomats do, they meet everybody, and she was sitting next to the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, and said, "We don't like bullies." He looked very embarrassed because I think she meant him, but she didn't call his name out. South Africa is in a bind. Because of its relatively sophisticated economy, it needs to maintain trade relations with East and West. Its biggest trading partners, it's not Russia. It's the European Union as a bloc. It's the Americans. If you put them together, they balance our trade relations with China. So South Africa needs to maintain sort of a neutral or a non-aligned position in terms of its national interests, both with East and West. But if you ask me politically and ideologically, it is not difficult to understand that the ruling party, the ANC, has had a very long relationship with the Soviet Union, with the Russian Federation, with the Chinese, in the course of many years of struggle for independence and getting rid of colonialism and apartheid and racism. And for that reason, it is very much aligned politically and ideologically towards the East rather than the West. And for that reason, I mean, our foreign minister said, it cannot be that people come and visit us and tell us who our friends and our enemies ought to be. We will decide that ourselves. And the South African government does not regard Russia as an enemy. It regards it as a friend. And so President Putin will visit the Brics summit in South Africa. And despite the attempt by the West to use the International Criminal Court, the ICC, to get Putin arrested and brought to trial in The Hague in Europe, South Africa will resist that kind of pressure and allow President Putin to attend the summit. Well, that is my prediction.
Well, that particular arrest or rumors around the arrest of the Russian president is going to be a very topical issue that we're going to keep our eyes on to see how it's going to play out. But it's nice that you have given your prediction on that. So finally, I'd like you to also predict the outcomes of the BRICS summits. What do you think would be the recommendations that would favor Africa and Africans after the stakeholders are done with the discussions there?
Could you repeat the question if you don't mind?
All right, so I said I'd like to know your prediction as regards the outcomes of the BRICS summit that will be held in June, as looking at how it will favor Africa and Africans.
Yeah, so in the first place, you know, if BRICS can make a difference if BRICS can find a way to promote a peace process for Ukraine, the outcome will be in favor of Africans because we struggle with energy insecurity and food insecurity and disrupted trade and rising costs of living and economic recession because of this conflict between NATO and Russia. That's the first important outcome that I think we would expect BRICS to achieve. The second one is, I think it will be very positive if BRICS can allow Egypt, Algeria, and Nigeria, maybe Senegal as well, to join the BRICS alliance, maybe in phases and over a period of time, because Africa is not well represented globally in these international fora, and I think this will be a plus, because these countries have significant power and influence and will be able to shape the BRICS agenda, and BRICS will be able to shape global agendas. That would be the second outcome. The third one is I want South Africa to promote the interests of Africans in free trade, not only continentally, but also between Africa and the BRICS members. That would be a third very positive outcome if those trade relations can be improved through the instrumentality or the facilitation of the Brics Summit. That would be a good outcome as well.
All right, thank you so much, Professor. We don't know how the West will react to these developments that's coming out from the BRICS and these countries that are hoping to join the group. But then we just keep our eyeballs on that also and see what mechanism or what way that the West will be hoping to react to this. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining this conversation.
Thank you. You should invite me back for an interview after the BRICS Summit. Then we discuss the outcomes.
Okay, definitely. We'll do that. We'll keep tabs with you. Thank you so much.
Okay.